right. Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Barth. I'm with Florida Fish and Wildlife, and today we're going to be talking about coyotes here in Florida, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So this talk comprises 4 parts. So first, we're going to go into biology of coyotes, then how they fit into the ecology of Florida, both the good sides and the bad sides, and also how they interact with people. So first, it's good to know that coyotes are kind of a new thing. So if it seems like it's new to you, that's because it's relatively new to Florida. Coyotes are by and large from out west. So Central Plains, anything westward, essentially. And over the last few decades, rather over the last century, they've been expanding into other parts of North America and arriving here in Florida back in the 1980s. And this is a little bit different than what we see with invasive species like Burmese pythons, where people have brought them from somewhere to another place. Coyotes, this is a natural expansion, and therefore we consider them a naturalized species. They've found their way to Florida and other parts of the eastern United States on their own through 2 main reasons. One is the fact that they've lost their major competitors, wolves. Wolves used to be very common throughout the United States, pretty much in any corner of it that you can find, whether it would be gray wolves or red wolves. But since massive hunting has essentially eliminated wolves from the majority of the United States, coyotes have been allowed to expand their niche, have been allowed to expand the areas they're allowed to be in and the kinds of items and prey that they're allowed to go for. So that's definitely helped coyotes. Also, what has helped coyotes is that with European and American land use changes, that we've converted a lot of forested areas into agricultural areas and large pastures, which coyotes love that. Coyotes love large open spaces where they can hunt in, with as long as there's a little bit of scrap of forest that they can rest in. So we've done a pretty good job at eliminating their natural competitors and providing them with a lot of good places for them to live. Now, coyotes, on top of that, are extremely adaptable animals for a lot of reasons. They're good mid-size, so they're between 25 and 40 pounds, usually in Florida about 28 pounds. They can adapt their home range size depending on how much food is available. So in areas where there's concentrated food sources, actually in urban areas where there's lots of things they can scavenge, they can live on about 3 miles square. Whereas in rural areas, they might need about 15 miles square to survive. They mate in the winter, have pups in the spring, and can have as few as 2 pups and as many as 12. On average, about 6, but it's really depending on how much food is available as to how many pups can survive that period. But they only breed once a year, and both parents care for the young, unlike domestic dogs, and they also have a family unit, younger adults who are from last year's litter who help raise the young of this year's litter. So coyotes also are having an advantage in that they can eat lots of different things. So if we were to put this on a pie chart, you could see that the majority of their prey items would be mammals, and that's by and large small mammals, things like rats, things like opossums, things like raccoons, rabbits, squirrels, all those kinds of things. But you can also see in yellow there that about 1/3 of their diet actually comes from vegetation. So grasses, nuts, berries, things like that, which we don't normally think of a coyote or any kind of canine is eating, but that is a pretty good chunk of their diet. They also will eat a mishmash of other things, a fair number of insects, reptiles, amphibians, and if they can get it, fish, although they're not very good at fishing. And about 9% of their diet actually comes from human sources. So that's garbage, that's pet food, that's bird feeders, that's things that in their normal environment without people they would never be able to get, but in a city or in a town where there's garbage cans and pet food outside, that's a bonanza of good calories that require very little work for them to get to. So they'll definitely take advantage of those food sources. And this is a little gross, but let me show you a couple pictures of the stomach contents of a couple of coyotes' stomachs, just to give you an idea of what they're actually eating. Pie chart doesn't really give it justice. So this is the content of one coyote's stomach. A few years back, FWC conducted a study looking at coyote diets, and what they found in one coyote stomach was 47 small mammals, rats, mice, that sort of thing. And that's, imagine an animal eating that number of rats in an 8-hour time span. They're digesting things about at the same rate as people do. So this coyote definitely had a field day when it was able to eat that many animals at once. In the same vein, this is the stomach contents of a different coyote that was found on the Naval Air Station in Pensacola. And thankfully, we can't see a whole lot of detail from here, but I can tell you that these are the remains of cockroaches. So delicious to a coyote, not so much to us. But imagine if you put together these two coyotes, they're essentially a pest control service in their own. They're eating rodents that we might not necessarily want around, and also insects that we very much don't want around in our homes. And I could show you a bunch of pictures of vegetation and other strange things that they eat, but here is really the top of the pile of weird stuff. So this doesn't quite look like much, but the chunks that you can see here are little bits of dog food. So people have at some point left out pet food, maybe for their own pet, and the coyote found it and ate it. This is a wrapper for, it must have been around Easter because we've got Easter candy. And this is a McDonald's wrapper that was found in the middle of Ocala National Forest, which is pretty strange because there aren't any McDonald's restaurants in the middle of Ocala National Forest. So it didn't get there on its own. We have to wonder how it might have gotten there, and we probably will never know about that. But certainly that gives you at least a little bit of an idea of how coyotes are able to survive here in Florida. They definitely are very adaptable animals, and they can eat a lot of different things. And they're extremely mobile, so they can travel long distances without any trouble. So let's take a look at some of the reasons why they actually benefit Florida's ecosystems, even if they're a relatively new member here. So definitely the biggest impact that they have on Florida ecosystems is that they fulfill a role that we've not had filled in a long time. So way back in the day, we used to have red wolves here in Florida. And red wolves were very important because they would manage populations of smaller predators, those of raccoons, those of opossums, those of foxes. So those animals didn't have any other larger predators to control those populations. So they would grow and grow and grow out of control, and there was not really a counterbalance except within their own species. Bears don't eat them. Panthers, they're specializing in larger prey, so they're not targeting these particular species. However, we no longer have red wolves, and for a long time we haven't had that kind of control. But with the coming of coyotes, coyotes definitely eat all these smaller predators. And it's a good thing too, because without that kind of control of smaller predators, other animals suffer. And this especially hits hard on bird species. So all of these predators here are avid eaters of eggs, especially raccoons and opossums, but rats also, but certainly birds have a lot of negative impacts if these smaller predators are out of control. Coyotes, of course, would eat birds or eat eggs if they could find them, but they're much happier eating smaller predators. They're much better equipped at doing so. So although this seems like a small contribution, it's incredibly important for Florida ecosystems. So what are some of the negative consequences that we could see from coyotes being here? Since they are a newish predator, could they compete with our native predators? So we thought that maybe this could be a concern for Florida panthers, since Florida panthers are an endangered species here in Florida. There's only about 200 of them left in the state. So we wondered perhaps they might have a negative impact on panthers. However, when you take a closer look at what panthers eat and where they hunt and where coyotes are hunting and what they eat, you see that there's not much in the way of overlap. Panthers like hunting in forested areas with larger prey. So they're mainly eating deer and hogs here in Florida. Coyotes, on the other hand, focus on hunting in areas that are open and on smaller animals, things like rats, things like rabbits, things like raccoons, things that panthers could eat but aren't really looking for. So although it seems like they could compete, if you look closer at their habits, there's not really any kind of overlap and potential for competition. So something that does fall a little bit closer to each other would be bobcats and coyotes. They do eat a lot of the same sorts of things. Bobcats also eat smaller predators, also eat rabbits and squirrels and rats. But do they actually compete? And our partners with University of Florida conducted a study to see what might be happening there. And what they found is that though bobcats and coyotes are living and hunting in the same areas, they have found a way to sort of divide up the space. They might cross paths every now and then, but their main hunting grounds are not in the same areas. So it seems that at least these two species do find a way to divide the space and not directly compete with each other. Also, there's always the potential for coyotes or really any predators to prey on endangered species. So Florida scrub jays, burrowing owls, indigo snakes, beach mice, all could potentially be on a coyote's menu. However, it's not very common for that to actually happen. And the reason is that coyotes are opportunists. They're looking for the things that are easiest and quickest to find. So if it's easy for them to find a bowl of dog food in somebody's yard, that's what they're going to do. It doesn't require much energy and it doesn't require much ingenuity for them to get to it. However, it takes quite a bit of time for them to find something that's rare and endangered because they're rare and endangered. So although they could theoretically be eating endangered species, that's not what they're targeting. Things that are the most common are the things that are most commonly going to come up on a coyote's menu. So some potential, but not really any direct evidence that it's overwhelmingly affecting a particular species. But this is all kind of leading up to the main question, which is how do they impact people? How do people and coyotes interact, and what are some of the negatives there? Because and this matters to us. We're all people, and we're living in this space with coyotes now. So what could be happening, and what can we learn here? And the first is, I just want to clear up some misconceptions that I commonly run into. As a member of FWC, my role here is to a lot of times talk to folks about human-wildlife conflicts. So if people are worried about something, I'm usually the one they call. So coyotes often get a bad rap right off the starting block. We have a lot of negative impressions of them whenever we go back to childhood and read Little Red Riding Hood or The Three Little Pigs or any movies with werewolves. We're trained from a very young age to fear large canines, to fear wolves, to fear coyotes, to fear anything like that, which is kind of an uphill battle because how things are portrayed in the media are not the same as how they are in real life. I mean, wolves aren't monsters, they're just animals like you and me. Another thing that comes up a lot is size. From a distance or from a first impression, coyotes seem like they could be very big. They kind of look like German shepherds, so you might think, well, maybe they're about the same weight and the same capabilities of a German shepherd. But that's not quite true. So coyotes, they may appear very large, but in reality, they aren't. We've seen this through carcass data, collecting of coyote carcasses from roadkills, that sort of thing. And the average turned out to be about 28 pounds, and the largest coyote that we found in that study was 39 pounds. So if you have folks who are saying, I saw a 100-pound coyote running through the street, that's extremely unlikely. It's not impossible, but it's extremely unlikely. Certainly if anyone has information that would suggest that there are larger coyotes, they are certainly free to call us. We would love to include more up-to-date information. Another common misconception is that coyotes are diseased, ravening maniacs just wandering the streets. The main concern usually being rabies. And the first myth is usually that if I see a coyote out during the day, it's a nocturnal creature, it shouldn't be out during the day. And therefore, if it's out during the day, it must be rabid. And that is not true at all. In this 20-year study of rabies information from Florida Department of Health, of the animals that were tested in that period of time for rabies, animals that had bitten people or scratched people, and therefore were submitted for testing. In that time span, only one coyote tested positive for rabies. And you might say, well, still one tested positive. Of course, yeah, that is there. But compare that with the same period of time, 1,800 raccoons tested positive for rabies. Or even a little closer to home, 230 cats tested positive for rabies in that same time span. So while any mammal has the capability of getting rabies, coyotes are actually statistically rare in getting rabies. But let's now look at some of the realistic concerns about coyotes. Depredation of livestock. So there is definitely a stereotype of coyotes and wolves taking sheep, taking goats, taking chickens, taking all sorts of small livestock. And this is certainly something that we do see from time to time. It's not something that is common by any means. Coyotes naturally are choosing things that are smaller than themselves. So a coyote is about 28, 30 pounds. So a raccoon is about 10 to 15 pounds. A fox is about 10 to 15 pounds. It makes more sense for them to go after those animals. However, a desperate coyote can learn how to go after larger prey, and they can actually teach other coyotes to do the same. However, it is not an inborn behavior, and it is something that grows out of convenience and desperation a lot of times. What is something that hits close to home for a lot of folks is the potential for losing pets to coyotes. Small pets, especially cats, are at risk of being taken by coyotes if they're unattended. And that's just the fact. There's no way to really sugarcoat it. The best way to keep pets safe is to keep them supervised. Outdoor cats don't really have a chance against not only coyotes, but other predators. And this, you can kind of see this in this camera footage. A while back, we put out a camera in an area that was experiencing some just unusual stuff. So we wanted to see what kinds of animals were in the area. And you can barely make it out here, but in these top two slides, on the same night, February the 24th of 2018, you can see that on that same day, you were seeing a bobcat, coyotes, and a domestic cat all in the same spot. So it's all happening there. It's all that same night. Things were happening, and that you're going to have predators out there. So it's not just coyotes that we need to be on the lookout for. We should be keeping pets supervised for a multitude of reasons, not just coyotes. And the last thing that comes up for concern for folks is, what is the risk of a coyote attacking me or my kid or anyone walking down the street? And again, this is something that can happen. It is not something that commonly happens. And the best way to kind of show this is to try to put it in perspective. So coyotes, in terms of attacks between two countries, the United States and Canada, averages about 9 attacks from a coyotes on people per year. In that time, in that same area, so United States and Canada, in the last 40 years, 2 people have been killed in coyote attacks, which is definitely tragic, but largely preventable. In the 2 fatalities, both of those were in areas where people were feeding coyotes, which is the quickest way to get to that situation. But also, you can also put this in perspective. The domestic dogs, just in the United States alone, generate about 1,000 emergency room visits per day, 5 million cases per year that need some sort of medical treatment. And in a 4-year time span, 2013 to 2017, over 180 fatalities just in the United States. So that's not to say that domestic dogs are necessarily something we need to get rid of because they have more injuries from domestic dogs. But it's something we're not even aware of because it's so common. And we accept those risks because we love dogs. We want them in our homes for the most part. We love having them as pets. But coyotes tend to be big and scary because it's an unknown factor to most folks. So in reality, of course, there's always a small risk of injury, but there are things that are easily avoided. And I'll talk about how you can avoid those things next, after this. But I mean, the question on a lot of folks' minds is, can we actually get rid of coyotes? If you say, well, no matter what, I want to get rid of coyotes. And in a practical sense, no, we can't. Coyotes are extremely common here for many good reasons. They're very smart, they're very adaptable, and people have tried to eradicate coyotes in various techniques. They've tried shooting, they've tried poisoning, they've tried bounty programs, all the things that had effectively eliminated wolves here in the United States actually helped coyotes. At the same time, people were trying to remove wolves. They were also trying to kill all the coyotes. And if anything, coyotes bounced back from that very strongly. So people may say, well, we want them all gone, but in reality, it just doesn't work. Biologically, they have a great capacity for bouncing back from great carnage. They're able to recover their lost members of their family group and in the next year. And in fact, a lot of times, if people try to eradicate coyotes, the next year you end up with more coyotes than when you first started with. They're very adaptable and intelligent, so they're also very hard to catch and very hard to kill. So from a practical standpoint, from a biological and ecological standpoint, no, it is not possible to get rid of coyotes here in Florida. But certainly there are ways to prevent issues with coyotes. Coyotes aren't naturally aggressive towards people. They don't want anything to do with people. They don't think of people as prey, but they can learn to be very tolerant around people if they're getting food around us or from us. So the best and easiest way to discourage coyotes from lingering in an area is to secure your attractants. And what I mean by that is, first off, never ever feed a coyote. It is the worst possible idea because it makes it so that the coyote associates people with food, and it encourages coyote to approach people looking for food, which is obviously a very bad idea. And for that reason, it is also illegal here in Florida to feed a coyote. So beyond that, you might have things in your yard or things in your neighborhood that might accidentally be attracting coyotes. That could be garbage. That could be pet food, bird feeders, any kind of fallen fruit, because remember, coyotes will also eat a lot of vegetation. So they'll eat fruit, they'll eat bird seed. And I mean, they will also be attracted to unattended small pets. So cats are especially at risk. I recommend keeping them inside as much as possible. And with smaller dogs, it is usually best to keep them either on a leash if you're out walking them, or supervised in a yard. There are some fences that can keep out coyotes. However, just keep in mind that coyotes can jump a 4-foot fence without a problem. So you probably need something taller and something to prevent them from digging under the fence. The other half of it is that coyotes are very responsive to human behavior. So if we act in a way that we're ignoring coyotes or we're hiding from coyotes, if we're running away from coyotes, all of that tells the coyote that it's okay for it to be in a certain neighborhood. But if you don't want them to be there, if you want them to be respectful of people and remind them that they're not welcome in your yard or in your neighborhood, what you need to do is change your behavior to change the animal's behavior. And you could do this very simply, and that's through hazing. Hazing is not college related, not that kind of hazing. This is scaring off the animal without injuring the animal. And you can do this in a lot of different ways, but really the simplest is by using your voice and your body language. If you are using a strong tone of voice, the same kind of tone that you would use to scold your dog off the sofa, or tell off somebody, that same kind of tone is exactly the tone you need to reinforce to a coyote that it's not welcome. Oddly enough, although they can't understand human language, they can certainly understand your tone of voice, your volume. If you can yell at them, if you can make yourself look bigger, if you can make yourself look larger, scarier, all the better. You want to stand your ground, make yourself look larger, and make some noise. And you can, of course, use all sorts of crazy stuff to help you with this. You can use whistles, you can bang pots and pans, you can use air horns, firecrackers. For scaring off coyotes when you're not around, you can use motion-activated alarms or motion-activated water sprinklers. You can even use bear spray to get a coyote to leave a situation. But really all you need on a general basis is your voice and your body language. So just some reminders. Coyotes are actually not very large animals, and they don't want anything to do with people. They are extremely common throughout the United States, and they are actually more common in suburban and urban areas because there's more food sources from garbage, pet food, and bird feeders. Attacks on people are extremely rare and by and large preventable. They don't want anything to do with us, and the best way to reinforce that they should be afraid of us is to haze them. Unfortunately, it is a fact that they will also kill small or small dogs if they have the opportunity. So it is good to keep pets secured inside. They can carry rabies, but it's not very common. And like I said, never ever feed coyotes. And in fact, it's a very bad idea to feed any kind of wild animal. It's in fact illegal to feed coyotes here in Florida, so just don't do it. Easiest ways to discourage them from lingering is to remove very high calorie food sources, garbage, pet food, bird feeders, that sort of thing. Please look out for your pets. It's very simple. It really just comes down to supervision. Please haze coyotes when you see them in an area where you don't want them to be. It's not very hard to scare them off. It just requires a little bit of moxie and a little bit of confidence. And in the extremely rare instance where a coyote is approaching you and seems like it's going to attack you, hold your ground, bring any small animals or small people close to you, and defend yourself. You are more than a match for a coyote. It's only a 30-pound animal. We can take them. But anyway, that is in the extremist, weirdest, oddest of circumstances. But just in case, if you should see coyote behavior that is strange or you have questions about coyotes, please feel free to give us a call. You can always call me at our Northeast Region office, which is at 352 number. And if you find yourself in an emergency, or if you know that people are feeding coyotes or some sort of illegal action with wildlife, you can always call our Wildlife Alert Hotline, which is a 24/7 hotline that is available below. You can also find out more at our website, myfwc.com. But just want to remind you folks, coyotes are here. They are good, bad, ugly in turns, but overall they are also just part of our world. They don't really want to hurt us, and they're just trying to make it in a hard world for them. So I hope you enjoyed this talk, and if you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call, and have a great day.